There's such a strange dichotomy and like a poetic irony for somebody like him who, first of all, just taking cheap shots, was the head of a company called Bad Boy, right? But to so many people, this is someone who, depending on who you ask and depending on your perspective, either represents the pinnacle of entrepreneurship and black excellence and, the face of what success in America is
That's
for
that's what his
for
lawyers say.
right, right.
Yeah.
Or, and I'm really speaking just, we'll disregard any of the actual, behavior and alleged activity, but just on a musical level, for so many hip hop fans, he's either that and like the face of like, good times and excellence and party and just thriving, or he's like the antichrist to so many hip hop heads in terms of what they would, as aesthetically attribute to be good hip hop music,
Well, this this
or
was this was this was always super interesting for me, right? Like, if you think, I always got the impression when talking to, you know, underground artists of the late 90s and early 2000s, of which I've, interviewed many over the years, they were set up as sort of in opposition to, you know, the shiny suit. This is when sort of the whole concept of underground hip hop was more or less born, right?
right,
As being sort of a separate part of
the haves and the
yeah.
have-nots. Yeah.
And so they were sort of the anti, shiny suit, bad boy commercial, sampling a song everyone knows type thing. I I don't think, and you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but in my experience, many of the artists didn't really see themselves that
Right.
way, as like stark opposites to what was happening. They were all at the same parties, especially in cities like New York, where, in the late 90s, the scene was still comparatively small. They all knew each other. And, Diddy would show up at Lyricist Lounge events and all of this kind of thing. So, like, certainly there are artists in that sphere who do hate him and view him as the antithesis of everything they hold dear, but that's not nearly, in my experience, that has not been nearly as common as, it was for the fans, let's say.
Yeah, no, it's definitely more of a fan-heavy perspective. I mean, what in your mind were sort of the turning points or significant milestones in the 7 weeks that you were there? Are there any moments that stand out to you as being, like, particularly fraught or significant or just meaningful to you?
Look, if I were to look back at the 4 or 5 notebooks I'm staring at here, uh, I could turn to any page and be like, "Holy shit." Like, more crazy stuff happened in that trial, and more crazy stuff, I heard more insane things. Like, I've probably forgotten, you know,
You've been
40
desensitized.
insane things,
Yeah.
that happened, right? Because there was so much. It's more when I think about it, right? It's more moments, right? It's more hearing witnesses recount what they said happened, right? Hearing about the woman who he used to work with, who testified under the name Mia,
Hmm.
hearing her talk about the time she said he sexually assaulted her so many times that after a while, it became a blur and she could recall some incidents only in flashes.
Hmm.
Um, Seeing Cassie have to, there was this one period when Cassie was testifying where, so much of the time I'm writing down stuff, right? You have to write by longhand, no electronics allowed, right?
Hmm.
So I'm writing stuff down by longhand the whole time, as quickly as I can, trying to get as many direct quotes as I can fit without my hand cramping up or falling too far behind in what they're saying so I lose something. So,
Right.
that takes a lot of concentration. There was this moment in Cassie talking, and she was on the stand for 4 days in total. There was this moment about halfway through where stuff slowed down and she was just shown photos
Hmm.
of escorts who were involved in these freak offs. And it was, oh, I knew that one by this name, you know, I saw him in this city and this city. That was the template, right? Name you knew them by, where you had jurisdictions, or not cities or countries in some cases, where you had freak-offs with that. And so just by the nature of that, there's sort of less to write down. So, things sort of slowed down. And that just seeing the photo after photo after photo, not by any means a complete list, but just they went through it, and it took probably 10 full minutes for
Mm,
them to get through the lists of all the men they had there. And that was just extremely affecting, given how she described these things as, like, she didn't want to do them, she said, and they lasted for days at a time, and she was on so many drugs and had to do them even with UTIs, and
mm.
all of this stuff, right? So seeing when things slowed down enough that you could get a sense of the scope, that this really did happen hundreds of times in cities all over the country, and indeed in places all over the world. That, for some reason, I think because of the change of tempo, almost, to use a musical term, that really sticks out to me, as a moment I won't soon forget.
I mean, I can't ask you to speak on behalf of any of the people involved, so really, I can only go to you for your own personal perspective. But what was it like for you? How are you able to deal with hearing day in and day out about some truly disturbing and graphic, happenings and allegations and actions? Well, like, are you just coming home totally zonked, or do you like sort of leave it? Like, are you able to sort of compartmentalize your brain and your soul really from what you're dealing with in the courtroom to then how you're moving and operating when you get home, which I'm sure also was littered by, if you went on social media, you're probably seeing, you know pictures and all of these reports
Mm.
that other people are doing about this trial.
Yeah, so great question. I don't know if I have a great answer, which is to say, during the period it's going on, um, I'm by the time I get home, right? Just to give listeners an idea, right? I'll get there, spend all day writing stuff down, you know, get occasionally running out during a break to call my editors or frantically type something on Slack about what happened. Um, Afterwards, I would often have to make a short video, here's the big stuff that happened in the trial, and or write a summary of what happened. Um, and then, you know, by the time all that happened and I was on the train home, I'd get home, have enough time to eat something, watch about 23 minutes of television, and then go to sleep so that I could get up at 5 a.m. to start the cycle. This is a very long way of saying there was not a ton of processing time during the actual trial,
Right,
right? You hear stuff, you're taking it in, but a part of your brain is sort of focused on, like, oh, did I get the exact words right? Or, like,
right,
oh, what's the summary going to be? Or, like, what's the takeaway today? Right? There's just sort of like a lot of this that is you doing your job. That said, amongst the reporters, there were plenty of jokes that weren't jokes about how we need to go to group therapy after this,
right,
right? There was everyone was aware that you were hearing very heavy things. Um the few the few days after it ended and I could finally slow down and take a nap, and it was tough. I felt like there was a period of a couple days where it was hard to get stuff out of my mind,
mm,
right? That eventually passed, and but I I think it wasn't until after it was over that really, some of the gravity of what I saw and experienced and heard people talk about, really, really had a chance to set in. Um, Having other reporters around really helped in the sense of, like, other people went through this.
yeah.
July 4th, 2 days after the trial, I had a one of the reporters, just got a few of us together at a small bar in Chinatown, and we drank and did karaoke and talked about what we'd seen, And that, so stuff like that helped a little bit, having some camaraderie with people who sort of you went through all this together.